There are secrets buried beneath the desert sands. There are deaths no one ever speaks of. And there was a fee who refused to let the truth stay forgotten. The wind never rested in that stretch of southern New Mexico. It slithered across the plains like a restless spirit, whispering through cracked windows and stirring the brittle branches of mesquite trees that had long given up on growing. Out past the last rusted mailbox, where the highway faded into dust and silence, sat the El Canto Wildlife Station abandoned by the government 5 years ago, now inhabited only by one man and one pig. Noah Langston had come here to forget. 32 years in service, first as a combat medic in Korea, then as a government vet, patching up half-dead livestock and dealing with Border Patrol quarantine zones, had hollowed out something in him. He'd buried his wife 2 winters ago, lost touch with the world's noise, and ended up in this forgotten patch of desert, living among sagging fences, broken equipment, and sun-bleached isolation. Each morning began the same. He'd rise before the sun, boil thick coffee over a propane burner, and sit out on the porch in a creaking wooden chair, cigarette glowing between 2 calloused fingers. He liked the quiet. The world, he figured, had said everything it needed to. He wasn't listening anymore. Then came Bishop. It wasn't the kind of pig you'd see in storybooks or barns. Bishop wasn't pink, round, or friendly-looking. He was a massive, battle-scarred beast closer to a legend than livestock. Noah had found him wandering along a dry creek bed after a livestock trailer overturned on Route 9 10 miles from the border. The wreck was cleaned up within hours, hushed fast by men in government trucks, the kind who didn't wear name tags. No one ever filed a report. But Bishop remained. The boar was big enough to make you pause. His body was hulking and thick, with skin like worn leather, stretched over muscle and bone. Coarse, black-gray fur covered his body unevenly, broken by streaks of silver across his shoulders that stood up like a ragged mane. There was something primeval about him, something that didn't belong in this world. A deep, jagged scar ran from the corner of his left eye down to his snout, the kind that looked like it had been torn open by metal or claw. That eye had gone white, clouded, and dead. But the other eye, the right one, was alive with something sharp and unsettling. It wasn't just intelligence, it was memory. As if Bishop hadn't just seen things, he remembered them. His stare could pin a man to the spot. After Noah brought him back to the station, the pig refused to leave. He followed Noah like a silent sentinel, sleeping under the old truck or just outside the front door, watching, always watching. There was a stillness to him that Noah couldn't explain. Not laziness, something more like patience, as if the pig were waiting for something or someone. It started with the digging. Bishop picked one spot, just one, about 30 feet south of the old fence line, near the edge of what used to be a military storage yard back in the early 50s. The containers were long gone now, but the concrete pads remained, half buried under sand and weed. The pig would rise every morning, lumber across the yard, and begin to dig in the same patch of sun-baked earth. At first, Noah thought it was just instinct rooting around for grubs or water. But Bishop wasn't rooting. He was excavating. Slowly, deliberately. He pushed aside dirt with his snout, then clawed at it with thick hooves. His movements were methodical, not frantic. The way he worked made Noah think of someone peeling away, time layer by layer. After the 3rd day, the hole was over 2 feet deep, and Bishop's snout had grown raw, tinged with dry blood. Still, he didn't stop. He dug from dawn to dusk, pausing only for water or when Noah called him off. And even then, reluctantly, if Noah dared fill the hole, Bishop would return the next day and start all over, angrier and more precise. What troubled Noah wasn't just the persistence, it was the purpose. The pig never deviated from the spot, not by an inch. He wasn't following scent trails or natural instinct. He was choosing that exact square of earth. Always that same spot. And sometimes when the heat shimmered off the sand and the cicadas fell silent, Bishop would stop digging, lift his head, and fix Noah with that one working eye, that dark, glassy stare. It was as if he were asking for help, or maybe warning him. Noah tried not to let it get to him, but something in the air had shifted. The station felt tense, still, as if the desert itself were holding its breath. That evening, the sun went down in a wash of crimson light, staining the distant hills like dried blood. Noah sat on the porch, coffee in hand, staring across the yard. Bishop was still there, pawing gently at the ground, the wind catching in the silver streaks along his shoulders, making them shimmer faintly in the twilight. "I don't know what's under there," Noah muttered. "But you do, don't you?" Boy, Bishop paused, just long enough for Noah to feel something cold crawl up his spine. Then he dug again. That night, Noah slept badly. He dreamt of pounding boots and harsh voices speaking Spanish, of locked containers and muffled cries in the dark. He woke before dawn with sweat on his neck and a heaviness in his chest. The coffee boiled stronger that morning. Noah didn't speak. He just grabbed a shovel and followed Bishop to the hole. If the pig was going to dig up the past, Noah figured it was time he helped. The shovel sank into the earth with a soft crunch, the sound of dry soil giving way to steel. Noah grunted, his back already protesting the effort. The morning sun had just crested the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, stretching Bishop's massive form like a black specter against the sand. The pig stood at the edge of the hole he'd dug for days, silent now, his one good eye locked on Noah with eerie intensity. The scar across his face glowed faintly in the angled light, a pale slash against the rough black-gray fur. His breathing was steady, hoarse from days of exertion. He wasn't digging anymore. He was waiting. Noah didn't speak. He worked the shovel carefully, scooping away the last of the loose earth Bishop had exposed. The soil here was looser than he expected, crumbly, disrupted. It felt wrong, unnatural, not packed like the sun-hardened clay that made up most of the station yard. This patch had been disturbed before, and not that long ago. After a few minutes, the shovel hit something soft but resistant, not rock. Noah knelt, brushing the soil away with calloused fingers. A dirty scrap of fabric emerged, faded olive green, the edge frayed and stiff with age. He tugged gently, revealing more. It was canvas military issue, a shirt or jacket maybe, stained, torn, but unmistakably part of a uniform. He sat back on his heels and looked up at Bishop. The pig hadn't moved, but his breathing had quickened. His snout twitched, and he let out a low, guttural grunt, not aggressive, but alert, focused. "Yeah," Noah muttered, voice dry. "You found something." "All right." Carefully, he kept digging by hand, revealing more of the fabric until it ended in a ragged edge. Beneath it, half buried in the soil, was a dull glint of metal. He brushed at it, revealing a broken dog tag snapped diagonally. The letters barely legible. Rivas, M-U-S-B-P-O-P-O-S. The other half was missing. Noah stared at the tag in silence. USB, United States Border Patrol. The name didn't ring a bell. But the blood type, the broken chain, it all spoke of something abrupt, violent. His fingers caught on something else, round, cold. He pulled it free, a tarnished Mexican peso, partially corroded. 1950s. The edges were rough, as if it had been scorched or crushed. Bishop made a sudden sound. A low, chuffing grunt followed by a short snort. It wasn't random. It sounded deliberate. Noah turned to look. The pig's posture had changed. He wasn't just watching. He was alert, tense, his front hooves planted, head low, as if preparing for something. It reminded Noah of the way K-9 units would freeze when they scented explosives. He'd seen it on base, in quarantine units. But this wasn't a dog. It was a goddamn pig. "You're not normal," Noah muttered, half under his breath. "What the hell are you?" Bishop didn't flinch. Noah stood slowly, sweat beading on his brow despite the coolness of morning. The memories began to creep in, then not from this station, but from other place, other times. In the late 40s, early 50s, the El Canto facility had doubled as a supply outpost for units working the border. His own unit had routed sick cattle through here once quarantine zone protocols. Pre-vet inspections. He'd slept on a cot not 50 yards from where he now stood. Back then, it wasn't uncommon to see military trucks pulling into this yard, always under cover of night. No lights, no questions, just loads going in and none coming out. Officially, it was all animal transport, disease control. But there were whispers, and now those whispers echoed louder than ever. He remembered a man named Pike Old, weathered, eyes like gunmetal, a sergeant or something close to it. They'd crossed paths at a field hospital near Las Cruces over lukewarm coffee and sour tobacco. Pike had leaned in close one night and said, "There are things buried out there, Langston. Things Uncle Sam wants forgotten. Don't go digging unless you're ready to stay buried with them." Noah hadn't thought of that in over a decade. But here he was, digging, right where he wasn't supposed to. He looked back down at the uniform scrap, the broken tag, and the peso. All relics, all screaming of something hidden, something violent, and none of it belonged in the earth beneath a former rescue pen. Bishop snorted again, softer this time, and nudged the side of the hole with his snout. A gesture, urging, as if telling Noah, "Keep going." So he did. He widened the hole, careful not to damage anything further. The next item was a button brass, with a faint insignia he didn't recognize, then a belt loop, then what appeared to be the heel of a boot. Everything was broken, worn, chewed by time and soil. But it was all consistent with a uniform, military or law enforcement. More than anything, it reeked of cover-up. By the time Noah stopped digging, the sun was high and sweat soaked his back. His hands trembled, not from exertion, but from the weight of what he was uncovering. Bishop had laid down beside the hole, his head resting just inches from the edge. As if keeping vigil, Noah stood, wiping his palms on his jeans, and scanned the yard. It looked ordinary, peelant. But now, he saw it differently. This yard wasn't just old. It was haunted. He returned to the porch, sat heavily in his creaking chair, and lit a cigarette with fingers that shook more than he liked. Bishop remained by the hole, unmoving. "Whatever this is," Noah said aloud. "You already knew it was there, didn't you?" Bishop didn't respond. But he didn't need to. Bishop had resumed digging with quiet urgency. His movements were no longer frantic or compulsive. They were purposeful, almost ritualistic. Each scoop of dirt thrown aside felt like another layer of silence peeled back from something long buried. Noah watched from a few feet away, leaning on the shovel, breathing heavy from the heat and the mounting tension. He'd filled in the hole the day before, more out of caution than disbelief. He needed time to think, but Bishop hadn't accepted that. At dawn, the boar returned to the same spot, as if tethered by memory or instinct, and started over without hesitation. It was the kind of behavior that couldn't be dismissed as mere animal habit anymore. There was too much intent behind those hoofs. By noon, they'd hit something again this time. Not fabric or bone. Noah was the one who saw the edge first. A glint of rust-colored metal, flat and rectangular, barely peeking out from a layer of compacted dirt. He knelt down, brushing the soil away with slow, steady hands, heart knocking against his ribs. The object came free with a soft crackle of dirt, a small, rectangular tin box, hinged, sealed, its surface pitted with corrosion and time. He turned it over. The lid bore no markings, but there were faint scratches along the edge. Someone had once tried to pry it open with something sharp. The box gave with a reluctant creak, revealing a bundle wrapped in waxed paper, yellowed and cracked. Inside were sheets of folded, handwritten pages, curled with age and sweat stained at the edges. Noah lifted the first page gently. His breath caught as he read the scrawled name across the top corner, Manuel Rivas, Border Patrol, District 60. He sat down slowly on the dirt beside the hole, knees creaking, eyes scanning the opening lines. June 4th, 1957. If I die before I can get this to the right hands, let whoever finds this know the truth. El Sendero is not a protocol, it's a purge. The handwriting was hurried, forceful, angry. Noah read on, eyes narrowing. Rivas's notes were detailed and damning. According to the page's thesis, El Sendero, Spanish for the path, had started as an unofficial policy, a means of deterring undocumented crossings by capturing, interrogating, and forcibly removing migrants deep into the desert. But it quickly escalated. By early '57, Rivas claimed, the program had morphed into something else entirely: extrajudicial executions carried out by rogue patrol units under the guise of border control. Migrants weren't just being deported. They were disappearing permanently. They are taking them at night. Whole families. No records. No reports. Just lost in the desert. We are not law enforcement anymore. We are disposal. Noah clenched the paper, the weight of the revelation thick in his chest. Rivas had tried to blow the whistle. That much was clear. One page detailed a failed attempt to report the abuse to a regional office in El Paso. Another page referenced intercepted communications, suggesting someone within the patrol was watching him closely. The final entry was short, just a single line scribbled in haste: if they find this, they'll bury me here too. Noah exhaled slowly, as if the very ground were listening. He looked over at Bishop, who had sat down beside him, breathing heavily but quietly. The boar's one good eye flicked toward the tin box, then back to Noah. You knew, Noah whispered. He didn't expect an answer. But the moment he said the name Rivas, Bishop let out a strange, guttural noise. Not a grunt, not a snort. It sounded almost like a whine. Noah froze. Bishop had barely made a sound beyond his digging patterns. But this was something else, a long, low moan that vibrated in his chest, an expression of pain, recognition, grief. Rivas, Noah repeated, slower this time. Bishop lowered his head and nudged the tin with his snout, pressing against it with unusual gentleness. The expression in his eye wasn't just awareness, it was memory. The boar hadn't just found this box. He remembered it, or what it meant, or the man who buried it. Noah felt his skin crawl. He looked back at the final entry. They'll bury me here too. Was this Rivas's final resting place, the body they'd uncovered before dog tag? Uniform scraps. Peso was likely his. And now this tin, buried not far from where the body had been unearthed. It all connected. What chilled Noah wasn't just the evidence of murder. It was the intent to erase a person. No gravestone, no record. Just a silent patch of dirt in a forgotten yard, guarded by a pig who refused to let it stay hidden. He reached for another page. This one included a list of names, officers, patrol routes, incident dates. It wasn't complete, but enough to suggest Rivas had been collecting proof. Noah recognized one name on the list and felt bile rise in his throat. T. Langston, sector supervisor. His brother, Thompson Langston, had been stationed in the Southwest during the same years El Sendero operated. They hadn't spoken in decades, not since Thompson's quiet discharge and hasty retirement in the early 60s. Noah had always assumed the split was personal. Now he wondered if it had been something else. Bishop gave another soft grunt, as if sensing the shift in Noah's breathing. The silence around them felt tighter now. The sun was high, but the wind had died. Even the cicadas seemed to have paused. Noah could feel the land itself watching. He folded the pages carefully, placing them back into the tin, and sealed it again. The rusted hinges squeaked like a protest. Back on the porch, he cleaned the papers, laid them flat, and read them all again. Rivas hadn't just been seared. He'd been desperate, fighting to hold on to his conscience in a system that demanded silence, and he'd paid with his life. Noah looked out at the field, at the square of disturbed earth. He thought about Pike's warning all those years ago, don't go digging unless you're ready to stay buried with them. Well, he was digging now, and there was no going back. Night pressed in, heavy and silent, over the El Canto yard. Noah lay awake on his cot inside the main shelter, dreams haunted by Spanish voices and distant cries every so often. The wind would shift, whispering through the mesh screen and carrying dust motes in the moonlight. Bishop lay just outside, in that familiar spot by the doorway, breathing with the measured rhythm of a creature that has seen too much to be afraid. Then, around midnight, Bishop lowered a deep, resonant growl that rattled the still air like a warning horn. Noah jerked awake. That wasn't the pig's usual rumble. Something had unsettled him. He slid out of the cot, padded over to the door. The moon was waning, casting a thin silver light. Bishop stood rigid, ears forward, tail still. His breath steamed in the cold desert air. The source of his alert was visible the hole south of the fence, recently expanded. Now gaping, Noah's blood went cold. He grabbed his flashlight from the shelf, a battered maglite, and followed Bishop toward the pit. Each step felt as if he were crossing into another world, one where the dead might not stay buried. The beam of light revealed an outline, not rock or wood, but something human. Noah swallowed, drew a deep breath, dropped to his knees, and turned the light downward. Beneath an inch of dust and moonshadow, ribs gleamed against the dirt. They were bound hands lashed together with thick, rotting cloth, wrists tied above the pelvis. The body wore civilian jeans and a threadbare shirt. The collar concealed much, but a shape glinted near the chest, a shiny badge, still polished beneath the grime. He drew closer, heart pounding. The badge, Mexican law enforcement, probably municipal or federal policia. Noah hadn't expected to find a body. Enough evidence had been disturbing. But this, he swallowed again, reached in with gloved fingers, brushing soil aside. Under the right hand showed chapped, rough skin, far from a worker's or farmer's hands. This had belonged to someone who carried authority, someone used to denim pockets of power. As he cleared more soil, he saw a folding photograph tucked into a pocket, worn at the edges. He unfolded it gently. Beneath, the figure of a man in uniform in the desert, blue sky high above. Someone had scrawled in thick black ink, La frontera no es una tumba. The border is not a tomb. Bishop snorted behind him, nudging the badge with his snout. Then looking back at Noah, his eye reflecting moonlight, pleading or reminding, they're not forgotten. Noah's head buzzed with a tangle of thoughts. Manuel Rivas or someone else. Maybe the badge belonged to a second witness, who'd helped Rivas, only to meet the same fate. Whoever this was, they had been killed at the same time, tied and buried under that nightlight moon. He shook his head, voice hoarse. You killed him. Didn't they? Rivas's friends or enemies? He pulled the body free enough to identify the badge, a polished shield with the emblem of Chihuahua Federal Police and a nameplate etched H. Delgado. He didn't know the man, but the pattern was clear. In 1958, El Sendero wasn't just a rumor. It was slaughter. Noah gazed at Bishop, whose head tilted as if listening. The pig's heavy breathing slowed, as though absorbing the acknowledgement. Deep breath. He took the tin with Rivas's notes from his shirt pocket, holding it near the body, sharing the truth, as if to make it whole again. A dozen questions crowded his mind. Did Rivas's plans go awry because Delgado tried to help, then paid with his life? The air seemed to crack as he surveyed the shattered silence. He looked at the fence, the desert beyond, the indifferent stars overhead. He sighed. Okay, he said to Bishop, voice low. We dig more. The next dawn came pale and brittle, chill across the field. Noah set to work digging around the body, careful to preserve any artifacts embedded in the skeleton. Each foot of earth revealed more: a small rosary draped across the pelvis, a tarnished Mexican coin, an intact wallet containing a folded polymer identification card. The card was foul with age and moisture, but had stamped details: father's name, hometown somewhere in Chihuahua. This man wasn't a common coyotero. He had ties, maybe family, maybe even illicit, but he had a name and a story that now lay naked in the dirt. The deeper Noah worked, the more bones came into view. Each vertebra, each rib, told a narrative of violence and dirty. The skull followed, face shattered by blunt force trauma. The jaw dropped open, as if still gasping in eternal shock. Noah recoiled, mouth dry, emotion rising like bile. He draped a cloth over the body to protect it from scavengers, then backed away. Bishop stood beside him, silent guard. The pig didn't need to see what was there. It already knew. Noah dug another trench alongside the body and began brushing the soil aside, around a nearby buried object. Closer inspection revealed a leather folder, brittle and cracked. He opened it by flashlight, fumbling to keep bone fragments and documents from touching. Inside lay passport-sized photos, annotations in Spanish, receipts for carne processing equipment, but not for one-time use. This was someone's life in pieces: a letter dated February 1957, asking for asylum paperwork. Another note addressed to Rivas himself, scrawled in urgent handwriting. He has seen too much. Noah's mind raced. Delgado had tried to carry evidence, only to be caught. Rivas buried him secretly here until Bishop, decades later, refused to let him remain forgotten. He folded the photos, the notes, the ID, and placed them in a sealed archive pouch he carried from his medic kit. If this was Rivas's way of burying truth, Noah would ensure it returned to the light. He patted Bishop gently. We're going to tell them, both of them. Later that morning, Noah stood with Bishop before the hole, now a makeshift grave patch. He had temporarily covered the body with tarps arranged to keep water and insects at bay. Bishop sniffed once and lowered his head, silent vigil keeping him as watchful as ever. Noah's hand rested on the pig's bristled shoulder. Heat rose from Bishop's skin, vibrant, living. Noah closed his eyes. This place, this damned fence, was never meant to be a graveyard. We'll fix that, promise. Bishop snorted softly, grating the dusty wind around them. The desert woke. A cactus flower unfurled nearby, a stark white bloom against the ochre floor. Noah took it as a sign. He turned back to the task ahead. He needed help: legal, forensic, federal. He'd practiced underfield pathology long enough He could handle one body, two maybe. But out here, under the weight of history, he was outmatched. But he had Bishop, and the bones below the border fence had stories to tell. Noah returned to town before dawn to avoid curious eyes. The dusty local library had just unlocked its doors, its old tumble of card catalogs and hardbound tomes smelling of mildew and wood polish. He'd spent years working on ration lists, livestock vaccinations, and quarantine protocols. Now, he found himself hunting through faded government memos and archived newspapers in search of the truth behind El Sendero. By mid-morning, deep in a forgotten drawer labeled Community Contributions, 1960s, Noah found a weathered manila folder tucked behind stacks of church newsletters and farm reports. Inside was a carbon copy of a government memorandum, its top corner stamped faintly, "Confidential. Destroy after reading." He froze. The edges were yellowed, but the ink remained sharp. The memo was addressed to internal supervisors of the Border Patrol and referred to a temporary unit designated ES 1957. The language was clipped and technical, but the implication was chilling. The unit had been administratively dissolved in early 1958. All internal materials to be reclassified or destroyed. There was no record of how the folder had arrived here, but at the bottom of the last page, scribbled in a different hand, was a name, Emma Rivas. Keep this safe. Someone will need it someday. Noah's breath caught. This wasn't a random document. It was Rivas's own copy hidden away, not in an official archive, but in a public safeties, maybe slipped into a church donation box, or entrusted to someone in the community library decades ago. It was a quiet rebellion, a time capsule of truth. He looked up from the paper, suddenly aware of the silence pressing in around him. In that dusty corner of the library, surrounded by forgotten pieces of community memory, Rivas had left behind a message, hoping anyone would one day uncover it and finish what he had started. Before Noah finished scanning the pages, he froze at a familiar name, Thompson Langston, his brother. Thompson had been transferred to District 6 in July 57, shortly after the disappearance of Manuel Rivas. According to personnel records, Thompson received commendations for exceptional performance under stressful conditions in the following months. Noah's throat tightened. The memories rushed in the twin bedrooms they shared, their childhood fights. The night in late 1957 when Thompson shut the door and locked it from the inside. They had had a heated argument. Noah had accused Thompson of something, dozing off on duty, or worse. Thompson had been furious, claiming he'd done his duty. Noah had stormed out, and within days Thompson was gone, reported injured in an accident during training, non-combat related, sealed by the government. Noah had accepted the loss, wrote off his brother's silence, but now he wasn't sure what to believe. He closed the yellowed file and stepped outside, light filtering through dusty glass. Bishop waited beside his car, the scar on his face catching the mild sunlight, his eyes steady. Noah took a breath, his own heart pounding with doubt and dread. That afternoon, he returned to the library and looked through local newspapers. A small article from November 56 caught his eye. Border Patrol training accident kills Officer T. Langston. It described a Jeep rollover during night exercises on a dirt road. No photos, no extended details, just a brief notice burying the real story under a procedural tone. In the margins, someone had penciled, "Not enough info." Who covered this up? Noah recognized his own handwriting. He'd circulated a petition then to reopen the case. He'd assumed corruption in local officials, never guessed the scope. He sank into a library chair, head in his hands. Had Thompson been complicit? Had his brother been involved? Or a whistleblower who paid the price? It didn't reconcile with the brother he remembered, Keith. Nervous, always second-guessing himself. But it also fit with the man who'd risen through the ranks too fast, earned commendations in 57, and then vanished without explanation. Noah stared at the article, then closed his eyes. He thought of Bishop watching the hole in his yard, dragging up buried bones and evidence. The pig understood what Noah hesitated to even whisper. "Bishop," he whispered, kneeling beside the boar, his fingers grazing that brutal scar. "I dug up truth. But what if it points to family?" The pig sniffed, uninterested or perhaps reflective. Noah turned back to his files. He decided what he needed proof. Thompson had to be linked to the unit. Yes, but what did he do? A killer, a witness, a keeper of secrets. The next morning, he traveled 50 miles to the Border Patrol station near El Paso, a place he hadn't set foot in since his service days. The building stood pale against the steel blue skyway, the flag whipping overhead. He carried the tin box and the newspaper clipping. He felt ill, but steeled himself. Inside, records were archived in a back vault. The sergeant on duty recognized Noah and asked, politely but with tension, how he could help. Noah explained his name and connection as former staff and as brother to Thompson Langston. He requested documents related to ES 1950 and the accident report. The sergeant's face tightened. "That unit's files are sealed due to ongoing investigations," he said, voice low, "not accessible to the public." Noah nodded. "Maybe not. But I have this." He opened the tin box and laid Revis's papers across the desk. Tension sharpened the sergeant's expression. "Where'd you get this?" the sergeant asked quietly. "From a burial site," Noah said. "I found a body. And Bishop," he added, patting his pig's flank, "led me to it." The sergeant sighed and picked up the first page. After a moment, he said, "I'll need to refer you to Internal Affairs, but we'll copy these, and then we'll see." Noah left with copies made. Promise hanging in the stale corridor air, back at El Canto. Dusk stained the horizon in bruised purple. Noah sat at his desk under the solar lamp, arranging files. Revis's tin, Delgado's message, ES 1957 memo, newspaper clipping. He drew a timeline from June 50 when Revis began his notes, to Thompson's commendations in late 57, to the supposed accident in November, to the unit disbandment in early 58. He stared at the chart. There was overlap. Circles connected. The same people staffed the same events. It was circumstantial, but compelling. Still, he dreaded the answer. He closed his eyes. He thought of his brother's sharp wit, the laugh they used to share as boys, the man who once jumped into a frozen creek to retrieve his boot. That man couldn't have become a killer. Could he? He opened his eyes and began drafting a letter to the sergeant. Internal Affairs. Journalists. He explained everything, not as an indictment, but as a search for truth. He'd send copies to a reporter in Santa Fe, known for digging into corruption. He'd ask the priest in town to ensure both men, a federal officer and a federal pig, get a proper ceremony. He'd give Bishop a name plaque for Revis's grave, and invite any of Thompson's old buddies who'd truthfully serve under El Sendero to speak, even if that meant revealing family secrets to a hurting world. Dust drifted lazily through the beams of late afternoon light as Bishop led Noah across the yard, silent and deliberate as ever. Something about the way the pig moved slower, more focused, told Noah this wasn't just aimless sniffing. There was a purpose in each step, a gravity. Bishop stopped at the old supply shed, once a depot during the military's tenure at El Canto. The place had long been left to rot, boards splintered and rusted hinges creaking with the wind. But Bishop didn't hesitate. He trotted toward a collapsed brick wall near the back, lowered his snout, and began pawing at the rubble. Noah crouched beside him, brushing away decades of grime. Underneath the loose bricks, hidden in the wall's foundation, was a rusting steel safe almost fused to the old mortar. Noah's breath caught in his chest. Somehow, the pig had known. He fetched a crowbar, heart pounding, and pried open the warped door. The hinges groaned, then gasped. Inside lay a collection of items wrapped in oilcloth, a leather-bound notebook, a thick map, several reels of audio tape, and a manila folder, heavy with documents. The air that escaped smelled of copper and dust. History. Unburied. Noah unfolded the leather notebook first. Its cracked cover bore only 3 words in faded ink, El Sendero Ledger. Inside were handwritten entries, page after page of names. Patrol rosters, coded operations. But these weren't just shifts or supply orders. They were records of eliminations. Beside each name, short notes like Operation Buena Noche. 5 subjects processed, disposal verified at sectors device. Each red mark on the map that Rivas had left behind now had a corresponding look in this book. El Sendero hadn't been a rogue detail. It was an organized systemic killing machine. Beneath the ledger, Noah found the map creased from decades of folding, marked with bold red X's along dusty back roads and military corridors. Most now forgotten. They clustered along routes, once used by supply convoys or migrant relocation units. Each he now knew, marked not a checkpoint, but a grave. His hands trembling, Noah opened the manila folder labeled Personnel, ES 1957. Faces stared back in black and white. Uniforms, clean-shaven jawlines, proud stares. One name stopped him cold. Thompson Langston. His brother. 2nd Lieutenant. Listed as Operations Supervisor. East Route. He almost couldn't turn the page. Inside was a yellowed memo, thumbtacked to Thompson's personnel sheet. It read simply, Assigned to supervise East Route cleanup, August 1957. Cleanup. Noah's breath faltered. He looked over at Bishop, who now stood still, watching him with that one dark, knowing eye. The shed was suddenly too quiet. Noah turned to the final items, 2 reel-to-reel audio tapes labeled Rivas, Internal Dispute. He pulled the old field recorder from his satchel, clicked the reel into place, and hit play. Crackling static. Then voices. Rivas. Calm but firm. This isn't border patrol anymore. This is murder. Thompson. Strained. I don't like it either. But we can't just walk away. There are orders. Rivas cut in. Orders don't make it right. I'm turning this in. I've kept a ledger. Names. Dates. A pause. Thompson again. Softer. Wavering. I've got a wife. Noah, if I speak up, I lose everything. So do you. Then a third voice. Cold, flat, unknown voice. Langston. He's not walking out of here. And then a gunshot, followed by a cry. Tape hissed. Silence. Noah tore off his headphones, his whole body tensed, jaw clenched. The tape recorder clicked as the reel ended. The recording didn't just confirm what happened. It implicated Thompson. He was there. He tried to stop it, but he didn't. Noah stood, pacing inside the shed. Bishop shifted but didn't move closer. The silence between them felt heavy, like something wicked. The past wasn't just written in ledgers or captured on tape. It was alive in this place, in these walls, in the soil that buried men's secrets. Noah unrolled the map again. One red X was barely half a mile from the shed, beside a rusted marker where an old fuel truck once stood. The ledger entry matched subject buried. Ludatis, Langston present. It wasn't ambiguous anymore. Thompson hadn't just known. He'd been part of it. Whether by fear, obedience, or silence, it didn't matter. He'd stood by as a good man was silenced, and Rivas's voice, now preserved on magnetic tape, was calling for justice. Even after death, Noah looked down at the ledger, at the tape, at the map. He could feel the path in front of him solidifying. This wasn't about vindicating his brother. It was about finishing what Rivas started. As dusk fell over El Canto, Noah packed everything back into the safe, carefully layering each item. He left a handwritten note. For those who come after, this is truth. Do not bury it again. He knew he couldn't carry all this alone, but he also couldn't let it sit untouched. The evidence had to move, had to spread. He closed the safe, brick dust clinging to his hands. Bishop waited by the door. The wind had shifted, cooler now, as they stepped outside into the waning light. The map still gripped in his hand. Noah knew one thing for sure. This was no longer just his family's burden. It was the nation's shame, and it was time someone answered for it. The morning sun had just begun to stretch its pale fingers across the desert sky when the unmarked van rolled through the dusty entrance of El Canto Ranch. One of the men, speaking low and measured, cleared his throat. "We are with the Department of Justice Records Disposal Task Force. We're here to identify and secure any sensitive materials subject to recall." He lifted a clipboard deliberately stamped with a typed memo head. Noah glanced at the charred remains of his supply shed and the collapsed pen where Bishop had once slept. Soil samples were collected, photos snapped. The men packed them into unmarked bags, whispering measured comments to one another. Behind their backs, Noah couldn't shake the suspicion that they were hunting more than sensitive files. They were cleaning up truths. That evening, dust hung motionless in the heat. Bishop lay alone in his pen as the desert sky darkened. Noah was inside, reviewing transcripts from Rivas's ledger by lantern light, feeling torn between grief, guilt, and hope. Then came the crack. Noah bolted from the house, the sudden chill of night air slamming into him. He raced toward the pen. He burst forward with a fire extinguisher, but the inferno was too hungry. Searing foams sizzled uselessly, and he staggered back, choking on heat and ash. Bishop's frantic grunts burst through veil of smoke. Noah kicked open the mangled gate and hauled the terrified boar out, half dragging, half lifting as the pen surrendered in. That blaze was a message. By dawn, no. Bloodshot eyes, and the drive took all morning. Desert flats rolled by. Gas. They reached the Santa Fe Gazette in the early afternoon. The newsroom was small, but alive. Wood-paneled walls lined with framed exposés. Desks crowded with journalists typing into mid-century typewriters. No fancy gear, just fierce purpose. Izzy Velasquez, the Gazette's lead investigative reporter, rose from her desk when Noah entered. She had gray-streaked hair tied back tight, and eyes bright from years chasing truth. Bishop lingered politely beside Noah. No growls, no tension, only watchful intelligence. Noah laid out the evidence, Graffali ledger pages bearing the list of covert executions. The folded map, with red X's marking mass grave sites. The badly burned remains of the barn and pen, captured in photos. The audio tape with its confession and gunshot echo. And the personnel files placing Thompson Langston at El Izzy handled each item with delicate precision, glossing the ledger under her tungsten desk light. Scanning the map, examining soil-stained binding, then cupping her ear near the recorder. She pressed play. Static sniffed through the speakers. Then came Rivas's voice, calm, resolute. "This isn't border." Noah swallowed hard. Thompson's voice replied, strained, desperate. "I don't want this, but we have orders." The tape hissed. Rivas's voice rose, sharp with moral clarity. "I'm exposing everything. I've documented names, dates, sites. Then Thompson's voice broke. I have a family. If this leaks, we lose everything. Finally, someone clicked a brief pause. Langston. He's a liability. Eliminate him. Bang. Gunshot silence. Izzy sat frozen, jaw-jawing slightly before she regained composure. She hit pause. This. Noah shifted. Muscles wound tight. Izzy unfolded a piece of paper. I'm publishing within 24 hours. I have a front-page lead lined up. EL Sender 0 Border Patrol's Hidden Death Command. We need your okay, and we need you prepped. This is going national fast. Noah drew in, a trembling breath. He knelt, gathering discarded ash from the table edge. It's time, he whispered, almost to Bishop, for the world to know. By evening, the Gazette's wire service was flooded with reprints. The headline went live: EL Sender 0 Border Patrol's clandestine killings. Exposed. Scanned ledger pages, audio transcript, burned structure photos. It was 18 hours later. FBI agents, more official, with badges prominently displayed, descended on El Canto. They barricaded the charred barn and pen, issuing a search warrant, supported by Izzy's published evidence. Agents photographed every burned plank, bagged Bishop's hoofprints, seized the ledger and tapes. U.S. In the light of midday, Noah stood inside the crime scene tape, Bishop by his side, soot still caked on the ground beneath them. The pink scars of burned wood on Bishop, they thought they could wipe this away. He told Bishop softly, but truth isn't flammable. Bishop pressed into his hand like a living seal of determination. Izzy snapped photos, capturing the moment: man, pig, and faded barn burned but unbowed. Federal agents moved methodically, the U.S. Attorney's deputy in tow, planning next steps: DNA analysis on Cardinal's remains, secure collection of personnel files, summons for legislative testimonies. As dusk softened the desert sky to purple, the ashes in the pen began to feel like a monument, not to death, but to renewal. Agents loaded evidence. Izzy jotted notes into. They walked off the tape line together. The desolation of burned wood contrasted sharply with the promise of accountability. The ledger was in federal hands, the reporter had the public's ear, and the brotherless man with a battered pig had taken his first stand. Noah looked at Bishop's rimmed scar, remembering the night fire met greed. We're not done, he said, voice low but determined. Bishop snorted in agreement. The pen lay in ashes, but its story had reignited a controlled blaze, the fire of truth. The Santa Fe Gazette's special report landed like a thunderclap. Capitol Hill buzzed with urgency. Senior senators demanded a full review of Operation El Sendero. Declassified files were pulled from archives, and congressional committees prepared to convene. Lobbyists and watchdog groups mobilized. Hundreds of citizens signed petitions, demanding justice for victims whose graves were marked by red X's on Bishop's mile. Back at El Canto, the attention came in waves of reporters and historians, survivors and students. Cameras probed the charred pen and cracked foundation of the supply shed. But amid the flurry, one figure emerged as the heart of it all: Bishop, scarred, silent, monumental. Veteran journalist Izzy Velasquez called him the living witness, a reminder that even animals, those we've silenced, can remember what we tried to bury. On national news shows, she proudly lifted photos of Bishop's milky eye, tying it to revelations from Noah. People responded. The pig became a symbol, an unexpected catalyst that demanded humanity face its darkest chapters. Within days, the first hearing took place, under harsh lights. Representatives in suits paced the dais. A wall of screens projected ledger entries, Rivas's map overlaying national forest boundary lines, audio clips looping across speakers, and behind it all stood one witness, that no one could prepare for Bishop. Tethered gently to Noah, a quiet sentinel amid chaos, Noah leaned into Bishop's flank, offering safe reassurance. A congressman behind the lectern cleared his throat. "Mr. Langston," he began, voice low in formality, "can you confirm that this animal, this creature led you to discover mass graves?" Noah looked to the pig, whose burned and scarred frame stood steady under scrutiny. He didn't speak, Noah replied. But he didn't need to. He remembered. And he reminded us. The room stirred. Media cameras captured every nuance. Some scoffed at the spectacle, while most leaned forward. Suddenly unlikely, but unshakable. Bishop had become a witness. No book, no ledger, no testimony could match. Weeks later, El Canto Ranch reopened its gates, no longer a lonely outpost, but a center for learning and remembrance. Noah stayed. He refused to sell or abandon the place. Instead, he dedicated the ranch to honesty and history. In the yard, a fresh sign swung in desert wind, Riva's Sanctuary for Truth and Remembrance under its letters. Carved wood showed a silhouette, a boar's head beside a cowboy hat. Two pairs of eyes, one blind, one sharp, integrated into the design. School buses rolled in from nearby pueblos. Students eager for history beyond textbooks found Bishop grazing calmly by a restored pen. Inside the old supply shed, Noah installed displays, ledger pages under glass, audio stations playing Rivas's voice, the charred timbers from Bishop's pen preserved in resin. Teachers guided students through the narrative, why secrets are dangerous, why courage matters, and how one unlikely animal had changed everything. Journalists were welcome, conditioned on respect and empathy. Human rights advocates held events on racial profiling and immigration at the sanctuary. Survivors of older border conflicts visited and shared stories. The memorial flagpole flew the Texas-New Mexico border flag. But beneath it, a plaque read, "Here we remember the silent victims. Here we honor the ones who would not be silent." Noah had never imagined his sunset years spent as a living museum curator. Yet there he was, teaching history, hosting interviews, leaning into memories he once wished to forget. One afternoon, at the base of Rivas's memorial bench, a child no older than 10 asked, "Does Bishop really remember Noah?" Knelt by the pig's side. Bishop sniffed the child's hand gently. The wind stirred the engravings on the bench. "La frontera no es una tumba." "They say pigs don't forget," Noah said softly. "But Bishop..." He paused, running his hand over the pig's flank, where the scar faded to gray. He never spoke a word. But in the silence, he remembered everything we tried to forget. The child nodded, as if understanding something much older. Months passed. Congressional transcripts were published. Former El Sendero officers faced charges. Files were permanently declassified. Local graves were unearthed with dignity. Remains received markers and ceremonies. Surviving family members of victims, some elderly, found solace. Even tears. Bishop lived on through it all. His presence in the sanctuary became legend. Photographers captured him in golden light, flanked by grieving descendants and tearful lawmakers. His milky eye held the world's gaze. At night, Noah would walk Bishop past the still smoldering beacon of the old pen. They'd stand side by side in silence under a sky full of stars, trodden earth at their hooves. Noah sometimes pressed his hand to Bishop's flank and whispered, "Thank you." A soft nudge would follow, an affirmation of kinship across species and time. One crisp winter morning, Noah sat at his desk in the old farmhouse, the same one built by his grandfather. He lifted a leather-bound journal and read aloud, his voice trembling in the quiet room. They called him El Sendero. They thought they could bury everything: bodies, deeds, memories, But Bishop found them. He didn't speak. He didn't even know to speak. But he remembered. He paused. Bishop lay nearby, eyes half closed in the afternoon amber light that filtered through window slats. I thought history belonged in dusty files and public monuments. But some truths are alive. Some witnesses don't have voices. Bishop never spoke a word. But in the silence, he remembered everything we tried to forget. Noah closed the journal, resting his hand on the cover. Outside, Bishop let out a contented snort, the simple sound of what must have felt like peace. In years to come, travelers on the dusty back roads would see signs Riva's sanctuary with a boar's silhouette, flags flying, people gathering. They would find peace here, and justice, and they would remember Bishop the pig who knew. And now, it's your turn. Imagine you live alone in the desert. No one beside you but an animal you once rescued just for companionship in the quiet years of your life. Then one day, it starts acting strange. Not panicked, not wild, just persistent. It digs in one spot, day after day, relentless. You cover the hole. It digs again. You block the way. It pushes through. You notice the scar, the mismatched eyes, and you start to wonder, maybe it knows something. So what would you do? Ignore it, like so many other inconvenient things in life, or pick up the shovel, kneel beside it, and dig, knowing that whatever's buried down there might change who you are forever. Tell me in the comments, if you were Noah, what would you choose if this story touched you? Hit like and share it, so more people can learn about Bishop, the silent but unyielding witness. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next forgotten story of the American West. And join us as we keep digging into the past, where truth still waits to be found.